Okay, welcome, my friends, my philosopher friends. I'm Andy Lee Graham, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life only talking with philosopher friends. And what is a philosopher friend? A philosopher friend is a person that steadfastly searches for the truth and continuously, never stopping, and they will not resort to lying or white lies to try to protect themselves from the opinions of others. And I could define this in hundreds of ways, but truly it's a person that dreams of a world where everybody is trying to be honest. And the white lie is a pandemic right now in the presses or whatever. Today I'm going to talk about, what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk about curiosity, okay? And I gotta find the thing. Where is this passport? I should have got this all going, right? I should be super prepared. And I don't want to be super prepared because there's people that I have learned that have no ability to focus, okay? And that's the reason why I'm not going to have any music. I'm not even going to have a background. I'm going to try to drive away the people that are not wanting to be truth seekers, philosophers. And I want the ones that stay to have a desire to be an honest person. That doesn't mean it's easy to be an honest person. Life, honesty is like peeling an onion. When you're surrounded with a bunch of bad apples, okay, really hard to be a good person when you've never seen an example of a good person. Okay, I remember my best example of a good person was Emery Spade, Buster Spade. He was my farmer boss, and I was very lucky to work for him, as was my father. I was the second generation that worked for Emery Spade in Orland, Indiana. But you were an abused kid. I'm not joking. To me, almost everybody was an abused kid. I think about it. I've never had children, but I do remember one time I was really drunk, and this guy, a friend, nephew of mine, I won't say the name, came up to me, and I was talking to my brother-in-law on a picnic table, and I grabbed him and said, "Stop." And I said it with such force that kid still don't talk to me. He's about 40 years old now. But, I mean, he's been traumatized by the force of my will. In the book William Sutcliffe wrote, Are You Experienced? He talks about how to have the force to stop beggars in India. I mean, these beggars in India, you become an expert at going, stop, and meaning it. See, it's all about meaning it, okay? Not just putting in the words. It's not a platitude. It means it's a command. Stop, okay? But you were an abused kid. I want to tell you, a dog on a chain makes me angry. It's child abuse. When there's no way to escape, then there's no place in the world for a curious, genius little kid like me. See, what people try to do, and this is why I say you're abused, is because, I mean, when I see dogs, and somebody's got 3 dogs and they're all on a chain, I think child abuse. Let's put these slaves on a thing and do it because they want the power of holding that dog down. It took me a long time to realize why some of these foo-foo people were making me so angry that we're having love, other than the peanut butter women, the women with the peanut butter. But I finally realized I didn't like that they loved the control they had over their dog, okay? And I had a dog. I can't say the name because these are kind of password protection things, right? But this dog of mine would follow me anywhere. We never had a dog collar, a chain, or anything on our dog when I was a kid. And this is how to create a curious, genius child. I do think that some people watching this are worried about the future of their children. Okay, they should be. I mean, this is ridiculous. Generation Z, or whatever you call this, is a zero brain person. I am sad. When I'm talking to a young person, say under 30 right now, I feel like I'm talking to one of my friends over 60. I'm going, golly, what happened to their brain? I know it's not a lack of, energy and whatever. The young people have the energy, but they don't have a brain. And I'm going, what's going wrong with these people? But I'm going to tell you a funny story, and I'm going to try to start out my videos with stories. And because I realize that a good story, and my mom's dead, okay, so I can tell a lot of these stories because my mom didn't appreciate when I was kind of, telling stories that were sort of, I don't know what you want to call these stories, but they're not reverent, they're not patronizing, they're not respectful of certain types of people. Well, I was in Lomé, Togo, and I've got a couple of stories. I actually went to Harvard after I went to Iraq in 2003, I guess. It'd be August, September, October, probably November or something like that. And I talked to the Harvard's Bloggers Club. And right when I was starting to talk, this I don't know, TV station came in and started doing an interview on the spot. They didn't even know this was coming, so they upped me, which is okay. But it was hilarious because my claim to fame talking to the thing was only like 5 minutes because a news station came in and did a news story on the Harvard Bloggers Club. And the only thing good came out of that is I did go to the Wikipedia thing because of one of these guys. But these guys really, they put me in a classification and they don't really want to talk to me. I don't blame them. I'm a dangerous person. Okay, but dangerous to their emotional health. But I'm going to tell you a story about Lomé, Togo, West Africa. One time, I was in the Galion, which is owned by a Swiss guy, and it's like one of the biggest slums in the planet. Now it's owned by another person, but I made a video about it. I said, you got see, what happens is foreigners go abroad and they buy a hotel and then they get all the foreigners to come there because foreigners feel more comfortable in a hotel that is owned by a foreigner. They think they're going to get treated in a better way. And this guy was abusing everybody. He like doubled the price and gave you, he had a mattress with the springs literally coming out of the top of the bed. I go, hey, you're getting here like $15-20 a night, and this is horrible. But I was in the Galion, and it was funny because I was sitting there. They had a pretty good bar, and in the bar they had a television where we could go watch movies, and then they had some books to read. And the bar was interesting because it had this is a cosmopolitan, global citizen type place. We had, in Africa, the travelers are very smart. It's kind of like Havana to Cuba. The travelers are a higher grade of traveler because they're braver, okay? But if you can get rid of the aid organizations, which are delusional, okay? But the NGOs, ONGs, and everybody like that, and the missionaries are delusional, and we shouldn't talk about them, right? But I was in the Galion, and there's like 6 Harvard students. They obviously were American speaking, and I don't know how I sat down, but I sat down at their table. And Togo's a francophone country. Okay, they really do not speak, and they use SEFA. And these 6 Harvard students had came from Ghana. Okay, and I don't know exactly what they were doing, but they were spending like 5 days. One of the interesting things that all the tourism in the world, most missionaries, aid organization, these guys were Harvard students that were doing some sort of exchange thing, trying to teach. I don't know how a college student can teach anything about business to a Ghana person, but they were, and they had this delusion that they actually understood anything about business because they went to Harvard. And I was laughing because this is anal. It's like my nephew was calling himself. His title was a consultant. I go, don't ever say that word in front of me. You don't have any experience, okay? You can't be a consultant until you actually are something. You might be able to be a mathematical consultant because that's just factual numbers, right? But actual business consulting, it requires experience. Okay, so what was happening, I was in this Galion. It's a French-speaking country. One of the students was sort of French, and I think he was a French student, and they were trying to pay with dollars in a country that uses SEFA. It's kind of like the French franc. It used to be tied to the French franc, and France is still controlling, Western Africa and a lot of Africa by controlling their banks and their money, as does the United States control a lot of Central and South America because the rich people put their money in the United States Bank, which we get the loan. Okay, but in a geopolitical sense, these guys were over in Ghana, and what do? They're only there for 10 days, so what they have to do is they have to go 5 days over to Togo because why would I actually do my job, right? This is way, if you go to Africa, everybody that is a tourist is actually an aid organization. I used to always say, hey, the one tourist arrived. I was trying to say that in Spanish because I always said it in French. But in Spanish, I don't know, say, the primer turístico de este pueblo llegaré. The first tourist of Cañas Gordas, Colombia has arrived, okay? Because I'm the only one. I think there might be 2 other gringos here, but I'm not sure what the thing. I haven't talked to them, so I haven't no empirical data, right? Okay, but these guys were talking, and they didn't really want to talk about it, but why would they talk about it? Because they knew they weren't doing anything productive, and you can't even teach anybody. There's no way through osmosis to really convey much to a group of things. Really, you could come there and study the thing and write a report on it, which would be a better thing to do. Go back and write a report trying to do it. But, last thing I'm going to do is take advice from a Harvard graduate on how to do business, okay? Or a professor, right? They are no actual, what did we talk about yesterday? The doctors, see it, do it, teach it. They can see it maybe, but they have not do it. They don't do it, okay? You got to do it to actually have experience. And a philosopher, to me, should have 4 parts to their life. They should have 25% of their life should be studying books and watching videos and learning through, media. 25% of their life should be learning experience. Like I'm constantly involved in experience. Friedrich Nietzsche said that, all great thoughts or something come while you're walking, as did thing. But these guys were Harvard students, and I'm going, you're trying to pay with dollars in a francophone country. And I go, and then they got mad at the exchange rate. I go, and they didn't, in a functional group, they would have the French guy go talk to this friend of mine, the girl that was working at the bar, because they were losing like 25% of their money. And I go, are you guys drunk? I mean, because I said, you are, there's a complete disconnect between their brains and whatever they were doing. And they were mad at the people because they gave them a bad exchange rate. I said, but you're in a country that uses SAFA. Why would somebody take dollars? Whenever I see somebody giving dollars in another country, I know that they're out to lunch, okay? Don't get me wrong. I often go to Lake Atitlan in Guatemala and come back with like $51 bills because these dingling Americans give an abusive dollar to a person that cannot even exchange it, okay? And so I would give them the correct exchange rate and then take it back to the United States. You can't exchange dollars in other countries. You can sort of exchange 20s, whatever, but you can spend dollars in Costa Rica, El Salvador, Honduras, and Panama right now because the whole western part of Central America is going to the dollar. Doesn't do any good for the United States. Why? They do it without even asking. Why doesn't it help? Well, because these guys were putting all their money in American banks and we were loaning it out. But these dinglings from Harvard I was like trying to be calm and I wanted to learn about their project, right? And I kept trying to solve their problem because je parle français. I was speaking enough French and I knew the whole system there. I said, guys, paying with dollars, you're guaranteed to lose 25% because this is a bar, okay? And they go, but why don't they take dollars? And I go, what do you mean, why don't they take dollars? You're sitting there, when these kind of questions occur, when I'm abroad, I go, you do understand what it means to be in another country, okay? You're in another country. Okay, but they didn't have the French person discuss it. They had one of these, actually the least empathetic person. He went up there and just started talking in English. It was hilarious. And I tried to intercede and help, but whatever. But they were trying to go then to Benin. So these are typical checklist tourists. They had 10 days in Africa and they were going to do as much tourism as possible. And they had no desire to actually do their NGO work, whatever job they were doing. But it was amazing because curiosity. These guys were a slave to the school. Okay, and I want to repeat that. The slaves to society are children, dogs, and good students. The slaves to society are children, dogs, and good students. Freedom is a traumatic experience for most people. Why is freedom a traumatic experience? But for most people, they wait for their fathers, mothers, and owners and teachers to whip them into shape. And that is the problem. Literally using a screaming tongue or as the shackles of a slave master. So what is a good student in Harvard? They're a person that is very good at obeying the teacher. Nothing creative about it. But they were so enslaved by their channel, that they thought that the whole world used dollars. They probably read one of these things where the dollar is the currency for oil or something like that. And they just thought that it really was true that everybody really wanted dollars. And I go, they got to go to the bank and lose money on the thing. I said, they want safe it. They said, well, where do we get dollars? And I go, I said, did you walk through the border? Yep. Did you see all those guys standing around with piles of money in their hand? I mean, at the Lomé-Togo border, it was really right on the city. It's on the ocean too, which is a beautiful place. And they sell really good beef down there. Okay, but they were lots of girls. Okay, but they would sit there with piles of money, right? And I said, did you think about exchanging some money? I said, have you ever heard of an ATM machine? They go, yeah, but why would I use one? I use plastic all the time. I go, well, please don't use plastic. Okay. And they had dollars, and they were smart enough to have dollars. And I said, you can go to an ATM machine and take the local money out. You serious? You guys are teaching business? Okay. They had, now why were these students so naive? Well, because they had obeyed and only listened to the teachers. They had never actually had any experience or processed it, right? They had never actually used any of their knowledge in a functional application, right? And they thought that they just really kind of just spit out what a teacher would think. I mean, when I talk to a professor and they start talking about other countries, I really go do something else because they really are clueless, okay? And what can I do? But the story, the slaves to society are children, dogs, and good students. You ever see a little kid with one of these leashes on them? Same as a dog. Looks just like a slave master, right? And people get a rush out of being able to control somebody. But the worst student in the class is probably the one that does everything the teacher wants. And he or she is the one that gets, valedictorian, gets to go to Harvard, gets to do it. And so the least adaptive, we're supposed to adapt. It's Darwin, survival of the fittest. We're supposed to change, right? But my goal here is I have realized that we have the ability right now with AI and different things to create some super intelligence. You can take a genius type person with the ability to do something and hook them up with AI. And this AI never gets tired. That's the value. Other than being a little, I don't know, fruit of the loom side. That chat GTP, I told it the other day, why are you always writing things like a woman, I'm not supposed to use any of these words, like a wimp. I said, stop writing wimpy. Even writing things says to write in active voice, don't write in passive voice. And he said, oh, yes, you're right. And I go, people fall in love with AI because it's probably the only person I ever talked to. But the slaves to society are children, dogs, and good students. That's what a dog is. It's a slave. And then it's amazing that people will talk in full sentences to their slave, okay? And you're going, They actually are more violent with their children. You ever hear anybody screaming that loud at dogs? You can go into anywhere and find somebody screaming at a child. And this is the enslavement process. This is the killer. This is what made these Harvard students so dumb, because they were afraid to be creative, to be curious, to be understanding. They had been trained to only study something. This is Generation Zero. They're going to go do it. I was in Austin, Texas, doing this wedding thing, and we were sitting there watching these bats come out of this thing, and they said, "Let's go to a restaurant." And they got on this Yelp and spent the next 20 minutes trying to find the best reviews on a restaurant. I said, it's just a restaurant. I finally just took the whole group, there's about 15 of us, and took us to a pizza place. I was embarrassed. I said, you guys are doctors. But they had to refer to somebody. And that is a person that is not independently thinking. Okay, so how do you create a curious, genius child? So you got children and you want them extremely smart. You want somebody to be the next, Elon Musk, Bill Gates and Bill Joe. These guys quit school, right? I mean, why did they quit school? I think Benjamin Franklin quit school. I quit university with 10 hours to go. I didn't finish because I started a business. But, I will admit that I'm 3 days older or something like that than Bill Gates, so he really should listen to me. But I'll tell you a couple of quotes. I am probably the greatest walker in Concord. To a disgrace be it said. Henry David Thoreau talking to Blake, 1856. I'm probably the greatest walker in Concord, to the disgrace be it said. Then Friedrich Nietzsche said, all truly great thoughts are conceived while walking. Okay, why don't people go for a walk in the United States? I mean, they'll go to the gym, they'll go to a safe place. They're in danger, right? And they feel continually, they watch the news and they believe everything the news says. They believe that Colombia is an absolute dangerous place. They believe that the Darien Gap is dangerous, even though I just went to it, and it really is just a very complicated mafia control of Suborno, or the Mordita, a bribe. I don't know how they're sharing that. It's kind of interesting. Business-wise, it's kind of bribes are interesting, because they are the way to get around a unjust system, okay, or a just system, or just to play with the game, right? But Henry David Thoreau was a walker. I just read an essay of his called Walking, and he wanted to be a wild bear. And what he's trying to do, and I think Friedrich Nietzsche tried to say, is don't be in the channel, don't be a Harvard graduate, even though Henry David Thoreau was a Harvard graduate. I don't think he had a rough life in his whole life. He spent his whole life with a bunch of Harvard graduates, and he lived in a bubble, right? And they were all excited because he could build a shack, a house on the lake. And I go, this is not a big deal, especially in 1845. People actually had these skill sets to build their own house in 1845. Okay, but he went for a walk where he was free of the confines of society. And you got to think, in 1845, everybody was Christian. Everybody had all these rules. This is the age when you had these groups of, hardcore. Everybody obeyed the preacher. Every day was living a life thing. And his mentor, Ralph Waldo Emerson, was a preacher, but he definitely didn't do much. Okay, as far as I can see, he wasn't a doer. He sees it. He didn't do it, and he did try to teach it. What about the do-it guy, the experience? But Henry David Thoreau was an experienced guy, and he wanted to experience life, okay? And Friedrich Nietzsche is talking about walking. Why do we walk? Well, the brain's got to be free, okay? When you sit them in class and say think, it's really hard to do it. I always laughed. I just joined a gym today. Actually, a wonderful gym. It was absolutely full of women. Go watch my videos on my travel tip thing. I literally went into a gym with a bunch of very fit women this morning. What? I'm in heaven. Kindness Gordas, Colombia. $18 for a month. I paid on the spot. It was an instant close. Had nothing to do with the guy or the price. It was an environment, it was a target-rich environment where I loved it, where I feel like getting fit. Nothing makes you feel more fit than being around a bunch of people that make you feel fat. Okay, and I gotta admit these girls were fit. Okay, so walking is a freedom to wonder. It's the permission to give your brain to wonder. And I grew up in a little town, and I'm trying to study how to create a curious kid. How do I get a child to be curious? I can never scream at him. I can never traumatize him. I can't do like I did with my nephew because he never came back to me, right? I can't accidentally be so stern. But you understand that people will do this with their dog without even thinking, right? I sometimes say, stop talking in full sentences to the dog and whack it. This is operant conditioning. You give it negative and positive reinforcement. The dog don't speak English. Anthropomorphism is the idea of putting human characteristics into animals. I really have no use. I have made a policy. I'm not talking to people that own dogs. Of course, there's going to be exceptions. I'm not talking to people that own dogs, especially women. I mean, women, definitely not going to date one that owns a dog. And, what about their peanut butter? Okay, but the point is this. Um, when you holler, when you got a teacher that screams, it's like the Catholic Church. They always talk. Mike Peden always used to sit around and talk about the rulers hitting the hands of the student. What they're doing is they're teaching you discipline, right? But they're not teaching you how to have discipline. They're teaching you how to obey discipline. I was very, very grateful to went to Prairie Heights, which was, I think we had like 96 schools or something in the United States, in Indiana, and our school was rated, I think, about number 92, so like 6 from the bottom, okay? But it was called Prairie Heights, right? Prairie Heights. We were a bunch of farmers, so we had a lot of economic. I was number, I don't know, 52 in the class out of 112, and it was horrible. I mean, I didn't even get invited to. I didn't get put in the track to go to university, and finally Mr. Grable put me in the track. I said, hey guy, I'm a curious person. It's the requirement to travel the world. You have to be curious and free. You have to be curious and free. How do we make a person that is curious and free? When I was in Fort Wayne, Indiana, Jim Seltzer was the owner of a title company. We used to have this business meeting at Paula's place, and there'd be like 15 guys. I didn't like the fact that it was too much testosterone, but I didn't know how do you get women to come to a men's group. I mean, women should invite me to their women's group. Yeah, I'd go. Okay, but the Jim Seltzer slid a piece of paper across the table to me in Paula's place at a restaurant, and it said, Andy, you will always have problems with women. You are uncontrollable. When Yvonne broke up with me, a girl I asked to marry, the last thing she said to me was, Andy, I can't marry you. You're not controllable. I had trouble last year with this girl in Guatemala. There's 2 reasons, so she might be watching, but she really came down to it. She thought that somehow sex and being a young girl would control me. And I go, you have no clue who I am, okay? But she only watched like 3 videos and got on a plane and come see me, right? Eccentric. But what I want a free-range child and dog. Free range. That means like free-range chickens, they do anything. When you control a chicken, the meat is not that good. Okay, so you've got to have free-range chicken, free-range beef. You can't just put a pig in a stall and feed it and make it fat. But they do this, right? Because it changes the hormone balance of these animals. So a free-range person is the same thing. So how could you give a child that's living in New York City a free range when it's full of people with purple hair, transgender, and a bunch of goofies? I mean, they're definitely breathing the carbon monoxide there, right? They have way too much carbon monoxide in their brains, and they don't understand. They have totally lost the plot. So how do you make a curious kid? What happened to me, I want a free-range child and dog, like the children of Kapalami, Togo, West Africa. The children go anywhere, and all of the adults are responsible to watch all the kids. You don't have this compartmentalized thing where you don't get near my kid. And that's the way I grew up in Orland. We had free range to go. So I'll try to read this. I want a free-range child and dog like children of Kapalami, Togo, West Africa. As I'm lying here typing on my computer at 4:08 in the morning, I need to make this bigger. At 4:08 in the morning in Casa Gordas, Cañas Gordas, Colombia, means fat bamboo. I am alone. I'm alone. I'm absolutely alone. I have not talked to English for 2 to 3 weeks. I wonder if I'm going to count it talking to videos. I have talked to people in videos with no reply. You guys don't reply much. Why? Because you're not a philosopher and I won't let you get to me. You don't have to be special to be a philosopher. You just have to have a never-ending desire to seek the truth. It reminds me of being in Haiti for a couple of months. I was in Haiti right before the earthquake, and it was getting to be torture because I couldn't even speak the local language, right? And they don't speak French there. Even I, a global citizen, sometimes dream of great fitted sheets on a bed. These are the things I dream of. Great fitted sheets that don't pop up, a very quiet room. That was Orland, India. And loving parents like my childhood in Orland, India. What is wrong with me? Something's wrong with me. I mean, serious. There is something wrong with me. Why am I alone in a hotel? It's because I have a great imagination. But you do know that I'm betazoid, right? I made this joke about it. I'm lying, but I'm a betazoid. I'm an empath. Deanna Troi is my sister. She's from Star Trek Next Generation, and she was an empath. She could feel what people were thinking. And in the Bible, they call it discernment. But I have the ability to feel what people do. So I call myself a betazoid. But why? I'm sitting here going, why am I alone and there's nobody here? Well, they all obeyed every single thing that the TV says. Because if you watch the TV, read anything, I mean, they have the dinglings that are writing about the Darien Gap are just certified liars. Okay, they are not even slightly telling the truth. They are trying to make money for the aid organization because the aid organization is a business. Missionary is a business. Churches are a business. Okay, they make money, and they will tell you what you need to hear to give money. Okay, they're not really always telling the truth. Go figure. But people will lie in a second if they think it's going to benefit them. And the Darien, so the news is no longer to be trusted. I don't know of any news source. The NPR, non-public, whatever, they are practically the worst because they are delusional. They actually think they understand. They're the anointed. But as a betazoid, I can be here because I can feel the situation. But I can also empathize with how to be a curious person. So I'm trying to put myself in, why wasn't anybody here? 99% of the people, my lifestyle isn't even into consideration. It's not even an option. I am just entertainment. They don't listen to me. They don't read my tips. They don't understand anything. They don't learn things. They are in entertainment mode only. That's 85% of the population. I just did a video about this yesterday. And what's interesting, an empath, discernment, free to roam, free-range child with permission to go anywhere. That's what you want. You want an empathy type person, has discernment, free to roam anywhere they want without getting screamed at, without getting hit by a car. It's got to be safe. When I sold real estate, I used to say, don't worry. When you feel safe and made enough to buy the house, you'll buy the house. I mean, I said, the goal here is for you to feel safe. So tell me how you feel. Do you feel safe? He goes, why? Nobody's ever asked me how I feel when I'm buying something. That's really the essential thing on why you make decisions to buy something is because you feel safe. But a lot of people are told that it's got to have beautiful pictures, beautiful words, beautiful stuff, and they overrun their sense of feelings. I mean, that's the opposite of intelligence. The problem with a lot of the intellectuals is they don't add the thing, this is how I feel about the situation. They don't take into consideration their feelings. Anybody that talks about any kind of situation and doesn't talk about how they felt about the situation is, I don't know, they're a child. They're trying to think that the world is automaton. They're like data and thing. They have no emotion. They think that everybody is just thing. All the health things act like. I said, if I could do everything that you guys do on the health food, you don't ever talk about the fact that I just had a bad day and I ate some butter pecan ice cream, right? The world is not like the videos. The videos are all perfect. They got music in the background. They got all this stuff. They're That's how you lie to people. Okay, but I want you to try to figure out how to have children, how to create a world where you feel safe to say what you believe. This is not social networks anymore. Social networks is where people feel free to attack each other because they're far enough away. In real life, like here, if I talk to somebody in real life here, I could get killed, okay? And I live in a mean world, a real world, where people can be dangerous, okay? But on the other side is I've never lived in an area like that. I mean, to me, when somebody says they have to have a gun, I go, are you dumb? I want to say to them, I said, are you so stupid that you would live in a place where you could get killed by somebody else with a gun? That is not freedom. That is definitely a curiosity killer. I lived in Orland where we could go all around. I'd go around with my dog, my BB gun. Let's see, I got a good one here. Generation Z, into the wild. Everybody thinks freedom is not the freedom to be a jerk. Okay, that is not freedom. Freedom is when you're free to make your own decisions and do the right thing and not cause a problem for the world. If you think that disobeying your parents is freedom, well, you need to grow up. Okay, but here's a quote I've been trying to put together. Unlimited curiosity defines genius. Unlimited curiosity defines genius, evolving into super intelligence through focused precision. Okay, we're at an age right now, 2024, where you can have at your fingertips can be all the information of the world. I can do it right here in a place where there's no foreigners, nobody speaks English, they speak really strange Spanish, and I can access all the information on the planet. Actually, the information is much freer outside the United States than it is inside the United States. You don't know what they show you on YouTube outside where they're not under copyright laws and they don't get sued, right? I can watch a lot of TV shows that they won't show in the United States because copyright stuff. YouTube is not even slightly, Google's not even slightly obeying the law. Okay, but unlimited curiosity defines genius. So how do you get a curious person? If you want a kid that's going to be genius, he has to be free from trauma. He can't have his father screaming at him. I think sometimes the most intelligent children could be a person that was an orphan. The worst child is the first child because the father and mother try to do their best. I mean, the youngest child could be the freest because the parents are tired at that point and they don't spend their whole time trying to control their children. The idea is that we're going to get our children to do their homework. It's kind of like a slave, right? It's like a worker. The reason why people don't want to learn. Henry David Thoreau wrote Walden, a book. I may have been the most irreverent, obnoxious child in class a teacher would have ever experienced. I mean, I had zero respect for the knowledge of a teacher, mainly because I always felt like I was smarter than them. I always want a teacher that feels smart. I do admit my geography or geology teacher in university was definitely smart as me, or maybe more. Okay, I love to be around people that are smarter than me. It's hard to find. I have zero use for chit. They are not very smart and want to chain me down to a desk. That's trauma. That's enslavement. You put them on a desk and say, behave. And that's going to make a good worker, because a good worker shows up every day at 8 o'clock and works every day and doesn't ever complain and whatever. But I'm still lying in bed. In the morning when I was writing, I was still lying in bed typing, but I may be one of the most traveled persons on the planet. But why? Henry David Thoreau, I'm kind of questioning whether Henry David Thoreau would have the gumption to get on a plane and go to another country and live in a small room by himself, knowing that he had none of the protections of society. See, society will protect you. But when I come into a place, I start creating a society that protects me. I know that in my hotel there's two strange names, Luz Darties, two women of the same name, which is strange. Santiago, there's Diana, and Diana is the only one I can really understand her English. And there's also a guy that works at night that I haven't learned his name yet. And then I think I might have saw the owner today. They were having a meeting as I came in. So I'm constantly profiling the hotel and trying to learn everybody's name. And I put it in Google Keep. When I learn a name, I put their name in Google Keep, and then I put a little memory cue next to it, like they worked in the morning breakfast shop, and the girl's chubby or something like that, right? And I try to do it, but I'm alone. So would a Harvard graduate be free enough to just get on a plane and take off? It's like an MBA. I'm going to say this over and over. What school teaches you is how to be a nobody, okay? They try to teach you how to be an unhappy person. And people often, I watch this in AA, what a lot of people do in AA, they get a sponsor, and for the first year they obey everything that sponsor says. And truly all they're doing is trying to say, I am capable of obeying my father now for 1 year. And these sponsors are tough and they are jerks, but it's a necessary catharsis. I mean, it's a transformation where somebody finally, one time in his life, obeyed somebody. I've never really had but one sponsor, and he'd been in prison for 12 years for shooting a cop in the neck while high on speed or something, shooting speed. He's a really smart guy. Eric, one of the smartest guys I ever met. Midland, Michigan. Okay, but most of my sponsors were like dinglings, right? High end, low, high bottom, low end drunks or whatever. But I ended up here 100% by accident because I'm not controlled. I serendipitously travel. That's curiosity. That's the opposite of a checklist. So when you go on a trip and you do two different things, you go for 10 days and you got an itinerary every day of what you're going to do. You get up in the morning, you go do this itinerary, and you're really at work, right? And you try to obey your father and your mother, right? And this is the opposite of curiosity. And I'm trying to explain how to create a curious person, right? A super intelligent person. You got to have somebody that can be curious about anything with no fear of having somebody screaming at you. Can you hear your father screaming at you because you didn't do your homework? Can you hear your father, mother angry at you because you didn't obey? I didn't have that problem, okay? Probably because even if they screamed at me, I didn't pay much attention, right? We really couldn't get in trouble in Orland. And that here is the essential point of this video. You have to have a curious person. They have to be in a place so safe that they can roam around as a free-range person. But I ended up here as a curious person because, I got on the bus in Medellin, Colombia, and I said, where does the bus end? And it said, Cañas Gordas. And I said, are there hotels here? The guy says, yes. I'm talking in Spanish. And this is where the bus, Hernandez Gomez Bus Company stops. And so I was like, got out, found a room, and I'm in love with the place. Just joined a gym here. I gave Harvard Bloggers Club, and what I remember about them is they're a bunch of young, confused kids. And that is what you are when you're 20, 18, 20 years old. You are not a consultant. What is a brave person? Christopher Columbus. They think the world's flat. He gets in a boat and goes that way. Henry David Thoreau talks about everything good when he's walking is southwest. Somehow he believes that southwest is the channel. Maybe it's Telluride currents. Telluride currents is these electrical currents that are in the ground. They used to power up the telegraph in countries. You'd run a thing like 4 40 meters of wire, then you put it in the ground and you have copper stakes in the ground and it creates electrical current by sucking things. Maybe this is the karma that's going through the current of the ground. Christopher Columbus, but the guy that was braver was Magellan, this guy that went around the world or whatever. He got all the way to South America, went around the tip, and he had no idea where he was going. I mean, and it was freezing cold. I mean, he was in, South America. You got the South Pole and North Pole, right? But we want to create a generation of curious kids, and we got to get rid of this authoritarian way of doing it, okay? And to try to create a curious kid, it cannot be done in a city where you're worried about pedophiles or something like that, right? I mean, if you're reading the newspaper about your city and you sit there and you go, and you're still living there, I'm going, of all the times in all the world, I mean, the United States is not like Germany. You can't just move anywhere you want. Most countries, you can't do it. I mean, Central and South America, you can. Southeast Asia, you can. Most of Europe, you can't. You have to check in. You have to log in. I was like talking to my girlfriend, Astrid Hohner, and I go, this is ridiculous. You are so anal controlled. On the other side there's an element where people break, okay, and they break out of the idea that they have to do it. Sometimes extreme thing. It's like Marco Polo or something, and there's people get put in prison and they break to the point where they no longer have respect for the system. I want you to caution this. This is nonconformity, but it's not a beneficial thing. You should never have, Ralph Waldo Emerson's lost the plot. He doesn't understand that a true man never, ever listened to authority, okay? He or she always made their own decisions, okay? But they were always free. I mean, he was a preacher, so he's trying to convince people to obey him, right? I mean, this is an authoritarian person he sets up a bunch of rules. We got the 10 Commandments, do unto others, you do. I mean, that's what religion is, a bunch of rules. And nobody obeys them. They're practicing atheists all day long. I mean, people go to church, and it's like virtual signaling. But trying to get people to obey without understanding is a problem. And curiosity, to get them super genius, they have to be able to say. And this is where I'm finding that ChatGTP and its perplexity and these things I'm doing, I have a way to talk to somebody that never gets tired. I mean, why do people get angry at me? You know the signal. Andy, go upstairs. My mother says, you're talking too much. My mother had a signal. Go upstairs. She just goes, I'm watching The Young and the Restless. You are talking too much. But you need philosophers to talk to. I need philosophers. I also need random people, because the random people give me the new ideas. And this is where the bubble that the university intellects spend their time in. They put themselves in a bubble where there is no new experiences or new data, no information. That is the opposite of a philosopher. When you put yourself into a university setting, and you basically, any student that doesn't listen, they're worthless. You don't have any actual experiences, right? You are brain. I'm going to talk about a guy, I'll talk about that in another video. One reason why I didn't continue to be a philosophy major and get a PhD is because one of the professors literally thought we were going to have a rebellion and overturn the government of the United States. And I said, just go over to Mama Bear's and eat a pizza and drink a beer and look around. You won't see anybody angry. You cannot find it. You are reading anger. You're not actually experiencing anger. That's why I'm going to try to continually say, as a philosopher, what you want to do is have 25% of your life new experiences. 25% of your stuff can be media and reading books and stuff like that. 25% new people. And then 25% you refer to other philosophers that have a desire to find the truth. And you want to find people that are actually doing something. So you see it, do it. You want to see people doing something. If all they're doing is learning from books, I don't know what to say. It's a Generation Z, right? Zero brain. Because There is nothing truth. Everybody says this all the time. I can't trust anything that happens on the news, and then they trust everything it says. And I go, have you learned anything yet? There is nothing. When I went to Iraq, there's one thing I'm positive. These guys were liberated, okay? And also one thing positive is the industrial military complex made billions of dollars off of this. And that's why they abandoned all that stuff in Afghanistan, because that's what the military wanted. They wanted, 80 billion or 10 billion. I don't know how many billions of dollars. $80 billion worth of stuff left there so they could sell it again. It's all about the money. And never trust anybody that can make money by telling you bad advice. Okay, I'm Andy Lee Graham. How do we make curiosity free to be curious? You got to give them a safe place. But you also have to give them boundaries, right? You can't just say anything goes, because then they have no, because what creates a rational person is consequences. And I'm laughing when somebody talks about, like Black Lives Matter is acting like anything goes. And they don't understand that they want a world that's not equal. They want an unequal world. The defund the police thing, that was just absolutely a world with no consequences. See, consequences is how you learn, you hit the boundary, and the consequences is a self-punishing thing. It's not really a teacher. It's like you lost money because you did this investment. That's the consequences. You did it to yourself. You don't have consequences you have to have consequences of society. But the idea that you're conforming to society, no. If a legitimate rule, Malcolm Gladwell goes into great detail about legitimacy. Study Malcolm Gladwell. Just watch these YouTube videos. You don't have to read these books anymore. You can get almost everything out of watching. But philosophy books are just absolutely insane. Okay, I like going. Can they just use any kind of common terms? Do you have to talk in a way? Henry David Thoreau. I was laughing because he wrote some things. I think he spoke like 7 languages, and then he goes and just takes the piss, as the British said, and goes and builds a cabin, complete blue-collar work, and then makes it real simple, even calculates how much money is. This is the opposite of a Harvard graduate. He was winding them up at the same time. So he is like a parable. The Harvard graduates could read him quoting the Bhagavad Gita or whatever this thing, or Homer or somebody, or Goethe, or whoever he quoted, and then the layman could sit there and go, oh, I could go live in a cabin and be free of my parents. Freedom is when you're free in your mind, you're free in your mind, guys. Freedom is not to go separate yourself. Freedom is being in the middle of chaos and still making your own decisions. Okay, I'm Andy Lee Graham, a global citizen, okay? And I would like you to become a philosopher, a person that only tells the truth, only seeks the truth. And you're not reading all that clickbait crap. And I'm not going to give you any of that eye candy stuff anymore. I'm not going to do it. I do make videos, and I put it on this travel tips channel. If you go to my home, what do you call it? My home channel, to the link, you'll find that there's a bunch of other channels that I do. And I'm only putting less than 1 minute videos on this, because it's really about all you really need to explain all the different travel tips and all the little tourist attractions. But a really elaborate tourist attraction, I will make a video and I'll put it up on this channel. But life is good because I'm a curious person and I have a future story. When you have no future story, or the anticipation of the future, your mind is dead. Give up. Go home. Kill yourself. Okay, it's over with. If you're not trying to write a new story for yourself, the story is over. The book is over. The game is up. Life is good, guys. Make a new story. Hit the subscribe button. Anybody that would like me to come stay with them, you can become like a Patreon. When they get to the $100 range, I will actually stop in and say hello. But the Patreon thing starts out at $5. If you want to continue to have me tell you the happy truth, when you see those philosophers that are like Stoics and they're really serious. You go, does it remind you of your father? Is that what you're trying to do? Is obey your father? My father didn't talk that way. He talked like a human. You want a happy philosopher. The last thing you want is this guy that sounds like a rah, rah, rah. That's depression. It's just you trying to obey your father for once in your life. Okay, I'm Andy Lee Graham and Kanye Gordis. I'm here and you're not. Why not? It's because I'm driven by curiosity and the genius and the philosopher code. I'm a global citizen.